Emma Larson was not the type of woman to vanish without a trace. At 32, she had established herself as one of Crestwood's most determined and insightful journalists. Her colleagues often joked that she had a sixth sense for uncovering secrets, a knack for finding the truth when others barely scratched the surface. But Emma was cautious, and her instincts were sharp enough to know when she was treading dangerous waters. She had been investigating a story for weeks, one she believed could shake the foundations of the town she had called home her entire life. Crestwood was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where streets were quiet after dusk, and the local coffee shop served as both a social hub and an informal town hall. Life moved slowly there, but behind the friendly facades, secrets festered. Emma had sensed this. As a journalist, she had always had an eye for the undercurrents, for the things people tried to hide behind polite smiles and routine greetings. Recently, she had stumbled upon something far more dangerous than a minor scandal or petty crime. She had discovered signs of corruption within a prominent corporation in the town, one whose influence reached into local politics and business. It was a Thursday evening when Emma's disappearance began. The day had been ordinary at first. She arrived at work at the Crestwood Times office just after 8 in the morning, carrying her usual oversized notebook and laptop bag. Her co-workers greeted her with the casual warmth of people who were used to her intensity but also trusted her discretion. Emma smiled politely, answering their small talk, but her mind was elsewhere. She had been following leads that morning, tracking financial records and making discreet phone calls to sources who had insisted on anonymity. Something about the behavior of one executive, Victor Kane, had set off alarms in her mind. He was new in town, charming and polite, the kind of man who drew attention without seeming threatening. Emma, however, trusted her gut. Something about him didn't sit right. She spent the day piecing together small inconsistencies, emails that vanished from her inbox, discrepancies in public records, and a series of suspicious late-night meetings she had observed. By the afternoon, Emma realized she was close to uncovering something monumental. She could almost see the story forming in her mind, a story that would expose the truth and possibly ruin lives. But she also knew it could put her in danger. For the first time in years, a real sense of fear crept into her usually confident demeanor. After work, she decided to stop by her favorite cafe, a small place called the Willow Bean, tucked into a corner of the old town square. Emma often used the cafe as a thinking space, a place where she could organize her thoughts without distractions. She ordered her usual, a black coffee with a splash of milk, and sat by the window, observing the quiet street outside. As she sipped her coffee, she noticed a black SUV parked across the street. She didn't recognize it, but the vehicle seemed to be idling for an unusually long time. The driver, a man with dark sunglasses despite the overcast sky, sat motionless, staring at the cafe. Emma's journalistic instincts immediately kicked in. She jotted a quick note in her notebook. Black SUV across street. Driver watching. Possibly related to Kane investigation. She didn't panic, but a knot formed in her stomach. She knew she needed to be careful. When she returned home later that evening, the town seemed quieter than usual. The street lights flickered as if they too sensed something was amiss. Emma parked her car in front of her apartment, retrieved her mail, and slipped inside. Her apartment was tidy, almost obsessively so, but tonight it felt different. There was an undercurrent of tension, a sensation she couldn't shake. She double-checked her locks and peered through the blinds. Everything appeared normal, yet the unease lingered. Emma had learned early in her career that preparation was essential when investigating dangerous subjects. She had created a safety plan, knowing that the work she did could provoke anger, fear, or even violence. On her bookshelf, she placed a USB drive inside an old hardcover book. On it, she wrote a simple warning, "If anything happens to me." Inside the drive were the initial findings of her investigation, emails, photos, and recordings detailing suspicious activities within the corporation. It was a lifeline she trusted could help someone else continue the investigation if she was silenced. That night, Emma prepared for bed but couldn't sleep. Her mind raced through the events of the day, the faces she had observed, and the odd behaviors that had raised her suspicions. Around midnight, she heard a faint noise outside her window, a soft scrape, almost imperceptible, like someone trying not to be noticed. Emma froze, heart pounding. She grabbed her phone and flashlight, ready to investigate but conscious of the danger. The street was empty. the shadows long and shifting with the dim glow of the streetlights. Whoever was outside had disappeared. Emma tried to calm herself, but the sense of imminent danger only grew stronger. She packed her laptop, the notebook with her latest notes, and the USB drive in her bag. She drafted a short email to Mia, her closest friend, explaining that she might be delayed on her latest story. The email was intentionally vague. "Mia, I'm working on something important. Don't worry if you don't hear from me tonight. I'll check in tomorrow." She sent it, hoping it would serve as a subtle alert that something was not right. The next morning, Emma never showed up at the office. Her colleagues assumed she had a last-minute assignment or had taken an impromptu day off. By mid-morning, worry had begun to seep in. Emma never missed work without notice, and her persistent dedication to deadlines was well known. When her phone went straight to voicemail and her laptop was missing from her desk, alarm bells rang. Mia called her repeatedly, each ring unanswered, until finally she reached Detective Harris, a veteran investigator in Crestwood who had a reputation for solving complicated cases. Detective Harris arrived at Emma's apartment within the hour. The door was unlocked, but there were no signs of forced entry. The apartment itself was immaculate, almost sterile in its orderliness. Nothing appeared stolen except for Emma's laptop, but the absence of struggle or violence puzzled the detective. Harris moved carefully through the rooms, noting the hidden USB drive tucked into the old book on the shelf. He didn't yet know its importance, but he noted its unusual placement. Outside, the town began to buzz with rumors. Emma Lawson, the journalist who always dug too deep, had vanished without a trace. Residents whispered about the corporation she had been investigating, about Victor Kane, and about the shadowy figures she might have crossed. Social media lit up with speculation. Had she run away? Or had she been silenced? As night fell on Crestwood, Emma's absence weighed heavily on those who knew her. Mia stayed at the apartment, pacing and worrying. She couldn't shake the feeling that Emma had sensed the danger before anyone else. Somewhere in that tidy apartment, amidst the books and notebooks, Emma had left a trail, one she had planned with meticulous care. If anything happened to her, someone would follow the clues. But at that moment, no one knew if Emma's foresight would be enough. The small town that once felt safe now held secrets in every shadow, and a chilling question hung in the air. Who would want Emma Lawson gone, and would the truth survive long enough to be discovered? The night grew colder, and the streets of Crestwood grew emptier. Somewhere, unseen, the wheels of a dangerous plan were turning. Emma's instincts had told her something was wrong, and she had prepared, as best she could, for the inevitable. But even the most prepared could not know how events would unfold in the hours ahead. And so, the stage was set for a story that would grip the town, captivate investigators, and ultimately reveal a chilling truth. Sometimes, the victim has already seen the danger before anyone else. The morning after Emma Lawson vanished, Crestwood was gripped by a sense of unease. The town that had always seemed peaceful now felt fragile, like a thin glass waiting to shatter. Detective Harris returned to Emma's apartment, determined to find any clue that could explain her sudden disappearance. The apartment remained meticulously organized, but the missing laptop was the most glaring absence. Among the books and papers that cluttered the shelves, one small detail caught Harris's eye, a hardcover book slightly out of place. Inside, carefully tucked between the pages, was a small USB drive. Harris carefully bagged it, not fully aware of what it contained. He was used to finding physical evidence, fingerprints, or weapons, but something about this drive felt different. It was as if it had been deliberately left for someone to find. Meanwhile, news of Emma's disappearance spread across the town like wildfire. Her co-workers, friends, and neighbors were all on edge, trying to piece together the puzzle. Her best friend, Mia, refused to leave the apartment. She stared at Emma's desk, at the unfinished stories and scattered notes, feeling a growing sense of dread. Something told her that Emma hadn't simply walked away. This was different, far more sinister. It was mid-afternoon when the call came in. A group of teenagers exploring the outskirts of town had stumbled across a body in an abandoned warehouse near the river. The scene was grim. The building had been deserted for years, its windows shattered, and the walls covered in graffiti and dirt. Inside, Emma's body lay motionless, a haunting sight that confirmed every fear Mia had been trying to suppress. Detective Harris arrived at the warehouse within the hour. The smell of decay and dampness filled the air as he carefully stepped inside. The forensic team had already begun their work, photographing the scene and collecting samples. Emma's body showed no immediate signs of a struggle, but her hands were clenched tightly around a small, folded piece of paper. The note was scribbled in hurried handwriting, unmistakably Emma's, and the words sent a chill down Harris's spine. "If you're reading this, follow the trail I've left. Trust no one." The note was cryptic, almost taunting, but Harris knew it was a deliberate message. Emma Larson had been meticulous in her work. She wouldn't leave anything to chance. The fact that she had anticipated someone reading this after her death indicated that she had been planning for the worst. Harris carefully placed the note in an evidence bag, realizing that every word could be crucial to solving the case. While the investigation at the warehouse was underway, Mia took the USB drive to her laptop. Her hands trembled as she inserted it, half expecting it to be empty, corrupted, or meaningless. Instead, a series of video files appeared, labeled with dates and cryptic titles that hinted at Emma's investigation. Mia clicked on the first file, and immediately Emma's voice filled the room. She spoke with calm authority, narrating the details of her findings, exposing suspicious meetings, unusual financial transactions, and people who had much to hide. The videos were raw and unpolished, often shaky as Emma had filmed them in secret, but the content was explosive. Emma had not only documented her discoveries but had also recorded evidence of the very people who might have wanted her silenced. Each clip revealed names, dates, and locations, creating a meticulous roadmap of corruption and secrecy. Emma's foresight was astonishing. She had planned every detail, anticipating that someone might try to destroy her work. As Detective Harris reviewed the warehouse scene, he noticed other unusual details. The security cameras around the area had been disabled, their lenses dark and lifeless. This suggested premeditation. Someone had known exactly where she would be found and had prepared the scene to appear abandoned and untraceable. Witnesses reported seeing a dark SUV lurking near her apartment the night she disappeared, but the descriptions were vague, adding to the tension and uncertainty surrounding the case. The discovery of Emma's body and the USB drive marked the beginning of a chilling realization. Emma Larson had left behind a trail meant to be followed, a trail designed to expose her killer and ensure justice even after her death. It was as if she had anticipated every step, every obstacle, and every deceitful hand that might try to erase the truth. Mia watched each video in disbelief. Emma had recorded herself observing Victor Kane, her new neighbor, who had seemed perfectly ordinary at first glance. But the videos revealed him meeting with unknown individuals at odd hours, carrying large briefcases and speaking in hushed tones. Victor's behavior was suspicious, but Emma had gone further than simply recording him. She had followed him discreetly, documented every movement, and noted conversations that suggested a larger conspiracy. One video, recorded the night of her disappearance, showed Victor entering Emma's apartment while she was elsewhere. The footage was grainy, shot from behind a curtain, but it captured enough to confirm that he had been looking for something, most likely the USB drive. Emma had anticipated this intrusion. She had hidden a tracking device inside the drive itself, a subtle but ingenious measure that would lead anyone following it straight to the person responsible. The police traced the USB drive signal to an abandoned storage unit on the outskirts of Crestwood. Inside, Harris and his team found a series of coded messages and additional videos Emma had hidden in plain sight. Each message contained instructions on how to uncover the identity of a killer, how to follow the trail, and, most importantly, who to trust, or more accurately, who not to trust. Emma's foresight was extraordinary. She had created a digital breadcrumb trail, each piece of evidence meticulously designed to protect her secrets until someone could piece them together. As the investigation progressed, the town of Crestwood became a place of unease and speculation. Residents whispered about the corporation Emma had been investigating, about Victor Kane, and about the shadowy figures who might have been working behind the scenes. Detective Harris realized that this case was no longer just about a missing journalist. It had become a puzzle of secrecy, manipulation, and betrayal. The deeper Harris delved into the videos, the more he understood the complexity of Emma's plan. She had anticipated not just her own disappearance, but also the steps her killer might take to cover their tracks. The recordings contained timestamps, maps, and observations that would have taken weeks to compile. It was clear that Emma had been aware of the danger she faced and had taken extraordinary measures to document her investigation in a way that could withstand attempts to erase it. Mia, overwhelmed by the scope of Emma's work, began to grasp the full significance of the USB drive. It was not just evidence. It was a carefully crafted map leading directly to the truth. Emma had been thinking ahead, planning for a scenario in which she might not survive. Each video was a message, a warning, and a guide rolled into one. The bravery and foresight behind it were remarkable, and Mia realized that Emma's disappearance was far from a random act of violence. It was part of a larger, more sinister story. Detective Harris, piecing together the information from the videos, the storage unit, and the warehouse, began to form a theory. Emma Larson had been silenced because she had uncovered something powerful, something worth protecting at any cost. Her meticulous documentation, her secret recordings, and her hidden messages suggested that she had been aware of both the immediate danger and the larger conspiracy she was investigating. It was as if she had become both the victim and the detective in her own case. The town waited with bated breath as Harris continued his investigation. Every detail, every observation, every shadow of doubt was being scrutinized. Emma's disappearance and the discovery of her body had transformed Crestwood from a sleepy town into the center of a mystery that no one could ignore. The corporation she had been investigating remained silent, but the evidence Emma had left behind began to speak louder than any official statement ever could. As night fell over Crestwood, the sense of urgency intensified. Detective Harris reviewed the footage once more, noting Emma's calm yet deliberate narration in each video. She had outlined her findings, identified suspicious individuals, and left instructions for following the trail she had created. Her careful planning, even in the face of imminent danger, was a testament to her intelligence and courage. The discovery of Emma's body was only the beginning. Her videos, her hidden USB drive, and the small note in her hands indicated that she had already anticipated what would happen next. She had set the stage for justice, even if she could not be there to witness it. In the darkness of the abandoned warehouse, the pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place, and the chilling realization settled over Detective Harris. Emma Larson had not only uncovered the truth, she had made sure the truth would be discovered, no matter the cost. By the time the investigation into Emma Larson's disappearance reached the public, the town had already begun to grasp the magnitude of a wake. The videos and hidden messages revealed a story of courage, foresight, and meticulous planning that few could comprehend. Emma had anticipated the danger, prepared for the worst, and ensured that the trail she left behind would lead to justice. The discovery of her body, while tragic, marked the beginning of a journey that would reveal the full scope of her investigation and expose the people who had sought to silence her. Crestwood would never be the same. The quiet town, once insulated from corruption and deceit, was now a place where secrets could no longer hide. Emma Larson's disappearance and the discovery of her body ignited a fire of curiosity, fear, and determination. Her USB drive, videos, and notes were more than evidence. They were a lifeline, a roadmap, and a warning to anyone who dared to follow her trail. Even in death, Emma Larson had become more than a victim. She had become a guide, leading Detective Harris, Mia, and anyone who would follow in her footsteps through the labyrinth of deceit she had uncovered. Her courage, intelligence, and meticulous planning ensured that her story, and the truth she had uncovered, would not be forgotten. And so, the stage was set for the next chapter of the investigation. The discovery of Emma Larson's body and the hidden USB drive had changed everything. The clues she left behind were just the beginning, and Detective Harris knew that the answers lay in following her trail, piece by piece, until the full story emerged. In the shadows of Crestwood, a silent promise lingered. Emma Larson's work was not finished, and her killer had underestimated the woman who had solved her own murder before the end had even come. The investigation into Emma Larson's disappearance and subsequent murder had begun to shift from shock to methodical analysis. Detective Harris had spent sleepless nights poring over the USB drive, the note Emma had clutched in her hands, and the evidence found in the abandoned storage unit. Every piece of material Emma had left behind was a breadcrumb leading closer to the truth, but the complexity of her planning made it clear that she had anticipated a labyrinth of deceit. She had left a trail so intricate that it required careful attention to every detail. Mia, still struggling to process the magnitude of what Emma had done, spent hours watching the videos again. Each recording revealed not only the corporation's clandestine activities but also the subtle movements of individuals who seemed innocent to outsiders but were deeply involved in the conspiracy. Among them, Victor Kane's behavior stood out. Initially a polite, charming neighbor, Victor had slowly revealed the edges of a darker side. His late-night meetings, his avoidance of casual interaction, and the secretive manner in which he carried briefcases to and from his vehicle. Emma had captured all of it on camera, her intuition and foresight evident in every frame. The more Detective Harris and Mia reviewed the footage, the more a chilling pattern emerged. Victor was not working alone. There were shadows moving behind him, other players in the corporation who seemed to operate in secrecy. Emma had noted their presence in her own observations, pointing out subtle details in behavior, clothing, and movement that most people would have missed. Every recorded encounter was paired with her commentary, highlighting inconsistencies or suspicious interactions. It was almost as if she had anticipated the police's scrutiny, documenting every angle, every possibility. One particularly disturbing video, recorded the night Emma disappeared, captured Victor entering her apartment. The footage was shaky, filmed from a corner near the window, but it clearly showed him rifling through papers and drawers. Emma had apparently hidden the USB drive from him, anticipating that he would try to retrieve it. What made the video even more compelling was the subtle insertion of a tracking device within the drive itself. Emma had whispered to the camera as she filmed, almost audibly but only for those who knew to listen. "If they take this, they'll lead you right to them." Detective Harris realized that Emma had created not just evidence but a trap. She had ensured that her killer, if they tried to remove the drive or destroy her recordings, would inadvertently reveal themselves. It was an extraordinary example of foresight and intelligence, a level of planning that few investigators had ever encountered. The USB drive was not just a collection of videos, it was a carefully constructed map designed to expose the true nature of a murder. The investigation took a new turn when the tracking device led Harris to an abandoned storage unit on the outskirts of Crestwood. The unit was small and dusty, filled with crates, old furniture, and remnants of forgotten businesses. But among the clutter were additional videos, coded messages, and a photograph that immediately drew the detective's attention. The photo depicted Victor shaking hands with an unidentified man, whose face was obscured by shadows. The image was deliberate. Emma had clearly framed it to emphasize secrecy, and it confirmed Harris's growing suspicion. There was a mastermind beyond Victor, someone pulling the strings behind the scenes. The coded messages were equally revealing. Emma had left instructions written in a simple cipher, easy for those who understood her methods but nearly indecipherable to anyone else. Each code corresponded to a location, a person, or a date. Harris realized that Emma had anticipated the need for discretion and had created a system to prevent her enemies from discovering the evidence prematurely. Her mind had been working faster than those who sought to silence her, creating a network of hidden clues that could only be pieced together by someone diligent and attentive. As Harris worked through the codes, he noticed that Emma had left subtle hints about her own intuition. Certain markings indicated where Victor had been observed meeting with others, while others suggested locations of hidden documents, conversations, or items of interest. Emma had essentially created a scavenger hunt for justice, a puzzle only the most determined could solve. The realization was both astonishing and unsettling. Emma had foreseen the danger to her life, and had taken extraordinary measures to ensure that her story would survive, even if she did not. Meanwhile, Mia continued to follow Emma's videos, increasingly aware of how methodical and intelligent her friend had been. In one recording, Emma recounted a suspicious meeting she had observed between Victor and another man at a quiet restaurant downtown. She had recorded every detail, the time of day, the vehicles parked outside, the conversations she overheard, and even the subtle gestures exchanged between the two men. Emma had labeled the video carefully, noting that it might hold the key to understanding the larger conspiracy. Harris and Mia cross-referenced the locations in Emma's recordings with recent financial transactions and employee records from the corporation. They began to map out a network of influence that extended far beyond Victor Kane. There were meetings in secret offices, unexplained transfers of funds, and conversations that hinted at threats to silence those who got too close. The evidence was mounting, and it became clear that Emma had been on the verge of a major revelation when she was killed. One particularly revealing video showed Emma following Victor late at night to a secluded part of town. She captured him meeting with two men, exchanging documents in the shadows, and handing over envelopes that seemed to contain confidential information. Emma had noted their movements with precision, marking every detail in her notebook. She had also recorded herself speaking to the camera, explaining the significance of the meeting, and emphasizing that these men were part of a larger operation designed to conceal wrongdoing within the corporation. The depth of Emma's investigation was astonishing. She had not only observed and recorded her suspects, but had anticipated every possible reaction they might have to her wake. Her notes and videos suggested that she had thought several steps ahead, preparing for the possibility that she might be attacked, followed, or even murdered. Her foresight created a chilling paradox. She was both the investigator and, ultimately, the victim, documenting her own demise with calm precision. As the investigation unfolded, Harris began to understand the psychological impact of Emma's work on those involved. The corporation and its associates had likely underestimated her intelligence and vigilance. They had assumed that silencing her would erase the threat, but Emma had turned the situation into a trap. By leaving coded messages, hidden recordings, and a tracking device, she had ensured that anyone attempting to interfere with her work would inadvertently expose themselves. Mia, deeply immersed in the recordings, began to realize the emotional weight of Emma's planning. Her friend had not just been meticulous but courageous, facing the possibility of death with a clear mind and a deliberate strategy. Every video and note was imbued with a sense of purpose, a message that justice was worth any risk. Emma had turned fear into foresight, and foresight into action, ensuring that the truth would eventually come to light. Detective Harris, piecing together the growing trail of evidence, began to see the outlines of the conspiracy. Victor Kane was a key figure, but he was clearly acting under the direction of someone more powerful, someone who had orchestrated the events leading to Emma's murder. The photograph in the storage unit, the coded messages, and the late-night surveillance all pointed toward a calculated operation designed to remove a threat and obscure the truth. Harris realized that Emma's approach had been brilliant in its simplicity and complexity. She had relied on basic tools, a camera, a notebook, a USB drive, but had elevated them into instruments of justice. Her ability to anticipate human behavior, to predict the actions of her adversaries, and to prepare contingencies for every scenario revealed a mind operating at an extraordinary level of foresight and courage. As the days passed, more clues emerged. Financial records linked Victor to unexplained payments and shell companies. Witnesses came forward with information about late-night meetings that had previously gone unnoticed. Every new piece of evidence confirmed what Emma had already documented in her videos. There was a network of corruption and deceit operating in the shadows, and Emma had been the first to expose it. Mia, overwhelmed by the growing complexity of the case, often sat in silence, watching Emma's recordings over and over. Each time, she noticed new details, a glance, a gesture, a phrase that suggested an ulterior motive. Emma's careful observation of human behavior became a guide not just for the investigation, but for understanding the depth of courage required to confront such dangers. Detective Harris, now fully engrossed in the investigation, began coordinating with other authorities to track the network Emma had uncovered. Her meticulous documentation, once seen as a personal safety measure, had become the key to unraveling a larger conspiracy. Emma Lawson, in her final days, had created a path for justice, ensuring that even in death, she could guide investigators toward the truth. By the end of the third week, the investigation had gained national attention. Emma's videos, her hidden USB drive, and the coded messages from the storage unit had transformed a small-town murder case into a story of remarkable foresight, courage, and meticulous planning. Victor Kane, once seemingly ordinary, had become a central figure, but the detective knew the real mastermind remained elusive. Emma had left the clues, but the final revelation was yet to come. Through it all, one truth became increasingly clear. Emma Lawson had become both the victim and the investigator. Her ability to anticipate danger, document her findings, and leave behind a trail of evidence ensured that justice could be achieved, even without her presence. Every piece of the puzzle she had left behind was deliberate, every detail purposeful. She had set the stage for the unraveling of a conspiracy far larger than anyone had imagined. The clues she left behind would guide Detective Harris, Mia, and the authorities toward the final truth. Emma Lawson's foresight, intelligence, and courage had transformed a tragedy into a meticulously orchestrated path to justice. The network of corruption she had uncovered was formidable, but she had ensured that no amount of secrecy or manipulation could erase the evidence she had painstakingly gathered. And so, the investigation moved forward, guided by the careful, deliberate steps of a woman who had solved the puzzle of her own murder before the end had even come. Every video, note, and coded message was testament to her brilliance and bravery, a roadmap leading inexorably toward the identity of the true mastermind behind her death. Detective Harris had been following Emma Larson's trail for weeks, piecing together every clue she had meticulously left behind. Her videos, notes, and coded messages had guided him through a maze of deceit, leading first to Victor Kane and then to a larger, more complex network of corruption. Each revelation seemed to open new doors, yet the full picture remained frustratingly incomplete. It was as if Emma had left the ultimate clue just out of reach, a final twist that would expose the true puppet master behind her death. As the investigation intensified, Harris found himself returning repeatedly to Emma's videos. There was something in her tone, in the pauses between her words, that suggested she had anticipated more than just a single attacker. Emma's observations about Victor Kane were thorough, almost obsessive, but certain frames in her videos hinted at a presence even deeper, more insidious, operating behind the scenes. The realization settled over Harris like a cold wave. Victor Kane might be the instrument of a murder, but the hand that had orchestrated the events, the mind that had ordered the hits and suppressed the truth, remained at large. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, from a source no one had considered. In the course of the investigation, a small item had been recovered near the riverbank where Emma's smartwatch had been found. The smartwatch had been partially submerged, damaged by water, yet its internal memory retained a wealth of data. What was particularly astonishing was that the device had been set to record automatically whenever Emma's heart rate spiked. The final night, the night of her disappearance, was particularly revealing. Detective Harris carefully downloaded the files, listening with growing astonishment. The recordings were raw, unfiltered, and intensely personal. Emma had recorded herself speaking into the device, narrating her fears and observations in real time as if she were speaking directly to an invisible ally, someone she trusted to follow her trail. The recordings were filled with moments of hesitation, gasps, and whispered analysis of her surroundings. She had documented not just what she saw, but her anticipations of what might happen next. One particular recording, taken just hours before her disappearance, contained a chilling revelation. Emma had pieced together evidence suggesting that Victor Kane was not acting alone. She described his late-night meetings, the envelopes exchanged, the shadowy men who seemed to orchestrate everything from the background. Then, in a voice tinged with urgency, she mentioned a name Harris had never suspected, Mr. Allen, her editor at the Crestwood Times. The realization struck with the force of a thunderclap. Emma's trusted editor, a man she had confided in for years, had been manipulating the story, suppressing her findings, and, ultimately, facilitating the corporation's attempts to silence her. Harris replayed the recording several times. Emma's voice was calm but resolute, her words precise. If anyone tries to stop me, it's because they don't want the story to come out. I trust Victor to act, but the real danger is closer than anyone realizes. Allen is protecting them. He's the one orchestrating it from the inside. The twist was devastating. The investigation, which had seemed focused on an external threat, had been overlooking the person who had been closest to Emma, the one she had confided in and trusted implicitly. Mr. Allen had been a mentor figure, someone who had praised her work, guided her, and offered advice on difficult investigations. To learn that he was the mastermind, using his position to manipulate her findings and control the narrative, added a personal and psychological dimension to the crime. Harris immediately began examining Mr. Allen's activities over the past months. He discovered a trail of anomalies, unexplained meetings with corporate representatives, adjustments to Emma's investigative articles that downplayed certain findings, and deleted communications that would have exposed financial misconduct. It was clear that Mr. Allen had carefully constructed a facade of support and mentorship, all while actively working to undermine Emma's investigation. The evidence was damning, but the final confirmation came from Emma's own foresight. Her USB drive, already filled with videos and coded messages, contained a folder labeled Allen. Within it were recordings of meetings where he had interacted with corporate executives, discussions that suggested deliberate obstruction of justice, and even instructions that would have directly threatened Emma had she not prepared countermeasures. It was as if Emma had known exactly what Allen would do, anticipating every move, and had prepared the evidence in advance. The revelation of Allen's involvement brought the case into sharp focus. Victor Kane, once seen as the main threat, was now understood as a pawn in a larger scheme, executing the plans of a man who had hidden in plain sight. Emma's brilliance became even more apparent. She had not only identified the external threat but had anticipated internal betrayal, leaving behind the clues necessary to expose the true mastermind. Mia, who had been assisting Detective Harris by analyzing the recordings and notes, could barely comprehend the depth of Emma's planning. Each video and message she had left behind was designed to ensure that even if those closest to her were corrupt, the truth would eventually surface. Mia felt a mix of awe and heartbreak as she realized the meticulous detail in which Emma had orchestrated her own posthumous investigation. Every angle had been considered, every potential threat accounted for, and every contingency anticipated. Harris decided to confront Victor Kane first. He was taken into custody for questioning, and the interrogation revealed a man who had initially appeared confident but quickly grew anxious under scrutiny. Victor admitted to following Emma on certain nights, retrieving items from her apartment, and participating in meetings, but he insisted he had been acting under instructions. The detective's suspicions were confirmed. Victor was a facilitator, not the mastermind. He knew parts of the conspiracy, but he did not know the full picture. With Victor's testimony and the evidence compiled from Emma's USB drive, the investigation turned to Mr. Allen. Harris arranged for surveillance and discreet interviews, uncovering further proof of Allen's complicity. Emails and phone records revealed that he had coordinated with corporate officials, attempting to cover tracks, remove incriminating documents, and prevent Emma's story from reaching the public. The discovery was both shocking and profoundly sad. A trusted mentor, someone who had been a guide and a supporter, had used his influence to facilitate her death. The twist was not just in the identification of the real mastermind but also in the realization of Emma's extraordinary foresight. Through her smartwatch recordings, her USB messages, and her hidden notes, she had anticipated Allen's actions and had documented them in a way that made it impossible for him to escape justice. She had effectively solved her own murder, leaving behind a trail that, if followed diligently, would expose both Victor Kane and Mr. Allen. As Harris pieced the story together, the psychological impact became evident. Emma's recordings revealed not just investigative brilliance but also profound courage. She had faced imminent danger, fully aware that her life was at risk, yet had calmly documented every detail, prepared countermeasures, and ensured that her investigation would survive even in the face of death. Her presence was felt in every step of the investigation, guiding authorities toward the truth with a precision that few could rival. The town of Crestwood, meanwhile, was beginning to understand the magnitude of the story. News of Victor Kane's involvement and the revelation of Allen as the true mastermind spread rapidly, leaving residents shocked and incredulous. How could someone so trusted, so seemingly integral to the fabric of the local news, be capable of orchestrating such a betrayal? The answer, it seemed, lay in Emma's meticulous planning, her foresight, and her extraordinary bravery. Mia, reflecting on the events, realized that Emma had created a blueprint for justice. She had anticipated threats from both external and internal sources, leaving behind evidence that accounted for every variable. Her recordings, notes, and messages were more than just investigative tools. They were a testament to her intelligence, courage, and determination. Emma had ensured that her story would not die with her, that justice would be achieved, and that the full truth of the conspiracy would be revealed. The final piece of the puzzle emerged when Harris, using the combined evidence from the USB drive, the smartwatch, and Victor Kane's testimony, confronted Mr. Allen. The confrontation was tense, filled with denials and attempts to shift blame, but the evidence was irrefutable. Emails, recordings, and documentation from Emma's hidden messages left Allen with no way to escape accountability. Every move he had made had been anticipated, every attempt to manipulate or obscure the truth recorded, and every secret exposed. Allen's arrest marked the culmination of a complex investigation that had begun with a disappearance and a single USB drive. Emma Larson had, in effect, solved her own murder, leaving behind a meticulous record that guided authorities toward the truth. Her foresight, intelligence, and bravery had transformed what could have been an unsolved tragedy into a triumph of justice. As news of the arrest spread, the town of Crestwood struggled to reconcile the shocking betrayal with the extraordinary courage of a young journalist who had anticipated the worst and prepared for it with remarkable precision. Emma Larson had not only uncovered corruption but had also ensured that justice would follow, even after her death. She had transformed fear into foresight, threat into evidence, and tragedy into a carefully orchestrated revelation. Mia, watching the events unfold, felt a mix of grief and pride. Emma's legacy was profound. She had faced a deadly conspiracy with calm intelligence, documenting every detail, anticipating every move, and ultimately exposing the truth. Her meticulous planning had allowed the investigation to succeed where it might otherwise have failed. Even in death, she had ensured that justice would prevail. Detective Harris, reflecting on the case, recognized the extraordinary nature of Emma's foresight. Few investigators, alive or dead, had ever approached a case with such clarity and precision. Emma Lawson had become more than a victim. She had become a guide, leading authorities through a labyrinth of deceit, betrayal, and corruption, ensuring that the truth would emerge. The twist, the revelation of Allen's involvement, was a turning point not just in the investigation but in the understanding of Emma Lawson herself. She had been courageous, intelligent, and extraordinarily strategic. Her death had been tragic, but her planning had turned it into a story of triumph, justice, and revelation. Crestwood would never forget Emma Lawson. Her story, her recordings, her hidden USB drive, and her meticulous foresight had ensured that the truth would not remain hidden. The twists of the investigation revealed not only the depth of the conspiracy she had uncovered, but also the extraordinary courage and intelligence of a journalist who had solved her own murder before the end had even come. The arrest of Victor Kane and Mr. Allen marked the climax of a case that had shaken Crestwood to its core. The town that had once prided itself on its quiet streets and sense of community now understood that beneath the surface, corruption and betrayal had festered. The revelation that Emma Lawson had anticipated every move of her killers, documented every detail, and left a precise trail for authorities transformed the investigation from a simple disappearance into an extraordinary tale of foresight, courage, and relentless pursuit of justice. Detective Harris had spent countless nights reviewing every video, note, and coded message Emma had left behind. Each piece of evidence was meticulously organized, cross-referenced, and analyzed. It was not merely proof of the crime. It was a roadmap, designed by a mind that refused to be silenced even in the face of death. Harris marveled at the depth of her planning, the brilliance of her foresight, and the clarity with which she had anticipated the actions of both Victor Kane and Mr. Allen. Emma had not simply investigated corruption. She had created a failsafe to ensure that the truth would prevail, even if she could not survive to see it herself. The courtroom was packed when Victor Kane and Mr. Allen were finally brought to trial. Residents, journalists, and law enforcement officers filled every seat, eager to witness the culmination of a story that had captivated the nation. The prosecution laid out the evidence meticulously, tracing the movements of Victor Kane, the communications with Mr. Allen, and the financial manipulations that had facilitated the conspiracy. But the most compelling evidence came from Emma herself, from the videos she had recorded, the messages she had hidden, and the instructions she had left behind. As the trial unfolded, the courtroom was silent when the first video was played. Emma's calm, articulate voice filled the room, describing meetings she had observed, irregular transactions she had uncovered, and the people who had sought to obstruct her investigation. The jury watched in awe as the small-town journalist, now long deceased, methodically exposed a web of corruption that had seemed untouchable. Every detail, every note, every coded message was a testament to her intelligence and courage. Victor Kane's defense attempted to minimize his involvement, portraying him as a minor participant in a scheme orchestrated by someone else. But the evidence was overwhelming. Surveillance footage, eyewitness accounts, and Emma's recordings left little room for doubt. Victor had followed her, stolen documents, and participated in attempts to suppress her findings. Even his own testimony confirmed that he had acted under instructions, implicating Mr. Allen as the true mastermind. The revelation of Mr. Allen's involvement sent shockwaves through the courtroom. A man who had been trusted, respected, and seemingly loyal was now revealed to be the architect of a conspiracy that had resulted in the death of a young journalist. Emails, phone records, and hidden recordings documented his manipulations, revealing a calculated effort to control the narrative, eliminate threats, and protect the corporation from scrutiny. The betrayal was personal, devastating, and undeniable. Throughout the trial, Mia attended every session, sitting quietly in the front row. Her emotions were a mix of grief, pride, and awe. Emma had left behind a legacy of bravery that was now being recognized in the most public and powerful way possible. Mia knew that without Emma's foresight, the case might never have been solved. The evidence she had painstakingly recorded had ensured that justice would be served, proving that even in death, one person's determination could make an extraordinary difference. Detective Harris testified extensively, explaining how Emma's recordings, hidden USB drive, and coded messages had guided the investigation. He described the tracking device within the USB, the way Emma had anticipated Victor Kane's actions, and the revelation of Mr. Allen's complicity. His testimony highlighted not just the criminal actions of the accused but also the remarkable intelligence and bravery of the victim, who had effectively solved her own murder. The prosecution's case was methodical, relying heavily on Emma's foresight and the digital trail she had left behind. Each piece of evidence was linked to a person, a date, or an event, showing a deliberate chain of actions that led directly to Victor Kane and Mr. Allen. The jury listened intently as the evidence unfolded, each revelation adding weight to the narrative of premeditation, manipulation, and betrayal. The defense, meanwhile, struggled to counter the overwhelming evidence. They attempted to cast doubt on the authenticity of the recordings, the credibility of witnesses, and the interpretation of Emma's notes. But each argument was systematically dismantled by the prosecution, who demonstrated how Emma's planning had left an irrefutable trail of evidence. By the end of the trial, it was clear that the conspiracy had been carefully orchestrated, and Emma Larson's meticulous documentation had ensured that justice could not be avoided. As the verdict was read, the courtroom fell silent. Victor Kane and Mr. Allen were found guilty on multiple counts, including conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, and tampering with evidence. The sentences were severe, reflecting both the premeditated nature of the crimes and the extraordinary planning involved. Victor Kane received a lengthy prison term, while Mr. Allen, as the mastermind behind the plot, faced life imprisonment. The outcome brought a sense of closure to the case, but it also underscored the remarkable role Emma Larson had played in ensuring justice. In the days following the verdict, the town of Crestwood began to process the extraordinary story that had unfolded. News outlets from across the country reported on the case, highlighting the unique circumstances in which a victim had anticipated her own murder and left a trail of evidence to expose her killers. Emma's courage, intelligence, and meticulous planning became the focal point of discussions, interviews, and editorials. Her story resonated not only as a criminal case but as a testament to human determination and foresight. Mia worked closely with Detective Harris to ensure that Emma's legacy was preserved. They compiled her videos, notes, and recordings into an archive, creating a permanent record of her investigation and the steps she had taken to protect the truth. This archive became a resource for journalists, investigators, and students, illustrating the extraordinary lengths one person could go to uncover corruption and protect justice. The community of Crestwood also took steps to honor Emma Larson. A memorial was established by the river near her apartment, the place where her presence had first been threatened and where her story had begun. Friends, family, colleagues, and residents gathered to pay their respects, leaving flowers, notes, and tokens of remembrance. The memorial became a symbol not only of loss but of the courage, intelligence, and determination that had defined Emma's life and work. In addition, the Crestwood Times, recognizing the importance of Emma's work, established a scholarship in her name for aspiring journalists. The scholarship was designed to support those who sought to pursue investigative reporting, emphasizing the values of courage, integrity, and meticulous documentation that Emma had embodied. Her story became both inspiration and guidance for a new generation of journalists determined to uphold the principles she had championed. Mia, reflecting on the entire ordeal, often thought about Emma's foresight and bravery. She realized that Emma had faced the most terrifying of circumstances with calm, intelligence, and determination. Her meticulous planning had turned what could have been a senseless tragedy into a carefully orchestrated path to justice. By anticipating the actions of her killers, documenting every detail, and leaving behind a precise trail of evidence, Emma Larson had ensured that the truth would prevail and that justice would be achieved. Detective Harris, too, was profoundly impacted by the case. In his long career, he had encountered many challenging investigations, but few had demonstrated the level of foresight, planning, and courage that Emma had displayed. He often reflected on the paradox of the case. The victim had become the investigator, guiding authorities from beyond the grave, ensuring that no detail was overlooked and that justice could not be avoided. The trial, the arrests, and the subsequent media attention marked the culmination of a story that had captured the nation's attention. Yet, the most remarkable aspect was not the exposure of the criminals, but the extraordinary preparation and intelligence of the victim herself. Emma Larson had faced danger with awareness and courage, creating a system that ensured her death would not be in vain. She had become both the investigator and the victim, turning fear into foresight and tragedy into justice. As months passed, the impact of Emma's work continued to resonate. The corporation she had investigated faced additional scrutiny, audits, and reforms. Officials and employees who had previously operated with impunity were now under observation, and the culture of secrecy and corruption in Crestwood began to change. Emma Larson's meticulous documentation and courage had created ripple effects far beyond her immediate case, reshaping the town and inspiring those who learned of her story. In the quiet moments by the river, where her memorial stood, friends and family remembered Emma not as a victim, but as a hero. Her actions had prevented further harm, ensured accountability, and demonstrated the extraordinary power of foresight and determination. Emma had transformed her fear into action, her danger into strategy, and her life and death into a lesson in courage, intelligence, and resilience. Even after the verdict, the town remained in awe of Emma's foresight. Investigators, journalists, and ordinary citizens alike marveled at how a single individual had anticipated the complex actions of multiple conspirators, documented every move, and created a trail that led directly to justice. Emma Larson had become a symbol of courage, intelligence, and meticulous planning, a reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, one person's determination could illuminate the truth. Detective Harris and Mia often revisited the recordings, the USB drive, and the notes, reflecting on the remarkable foresight that had guided them to the truth. Every detail Emma had anticipated, every scenario she had planned for, and every precaution she had taken revealed the extraordinary depth of her intelligence. The investigation, once fraught with uncertainty and fear, had transformed into a story of triumph, guided entirely by the brilliance and bravery of its victim. Crestwood, forever changed by the events, embraced Emma Larson's legacy. Her story, her courage, and her meticulous planning became a source of inspiration for the community, for journalists, and for investigators. Through her foresight, Emma had ensured that justice was served, that the truth was revealed, and that the memory of her bravery would endure long after the trial concluded. In the end, the story of Emma Larson was not simply about a crime. It was about the extraordinary power of foresight, intelligence, and courage. She had faced death with calm precision, documented every detail, and left behind a trail of evidence that ensured justice could not be denied. Emma Larson had, in effect, solved her own murder, transforming tragedy into triumph and leaving a legacy that would inspire generations to come. Crestwood would never forget her. Her name, her courage, and her story would live on, not as a tale of despair, but as a testament to the extraordinary power of foresight, bravery, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Emma Larson had faced the darkest circumstances imaginable and, through her meticulous planning and unwavering determination, had ensured that justice would prevail. Her story was a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, deceit, and mortal danger, one person could change the course of events, illuminate the truth, and leave a lasting legacy. And so, as the sun set over Crestwood, the town remembered Emma Larson not just as a victim, but as a hero, a guide, and a symbol of courage. Her foresight, intelligence, and bravery had created a path to justice that no one could ignore. Through her actions, she had shown that even in death, one person could make an indelible mark on the world, ensuring that truth, accountability, and justice would endure.